The year was 2081, and everybody was finally equal. They weren't only equal before God and the law, they were equal every which way. Nobody was smarter than anybody else. Nobody was better looking than anybody else. Nobody was stronger or quicker than anybody else. All this equality was due to the 211th, 212th, and 213th Amendments to the Constitution, and to the unceasing vigilance of agents of the United States Handicapper General. Some things about living still weren't quite right, though. Marriage, for instance, still drove people crazy by still having to acquire a license and still take compatibility tests. And it was in that moment that Harriet Bergeron decided to go to the Marriage Compatibility Center to see if she and Edgar matched. Intelligent people were unable to think very hard, but Harriet had a perfectly average intelligence, which meant she couldn't think about anything except in short bursts. And unlike her future husband's intelligence was way above normal because he possessed a discerning eye for detail. Edgar was issued cybernetic eyes that would expand and blur his ability to discern details. He was required by law to use it at all times. It was tuned to a government transmitter. Every 20 seconds or so, the transmitter would expand his eyes and blur his vision. This prevented people like Edgar from taking unfair advantage of their brains. Harriet was different. She did not possess any cybernetic equipment, nor did she have to wear a mask to hide her average attractiveness. However, she did have to carry an old Gothic dark lantern. The government claimed the lantern would mute her senses to avoid any inequitable abilities such as echolocation. Harriet waved goodbye as Edgar was watching an opera, complete with ballerinas. He tried to focus a little on the ballerinas. They weren't really very good. No better than anybody else would have been anyway. They were burdened with sash weights, and their faces were masked, so that no one, seeing a free and graceful gesture or a pretty face, would feel unequal or lead to thought destabilization. Edgar was toying with the vague notion that maybe dancers shouldn't be handicapped, but he didn't get very far with it before his eyes expanded and blurred his vision.
Ow!
Edgar winced, and Harriet left the house for her marriage compatibility assessment.
You seem a bit nervous. Are you okay, Ms. Bergeron?
True. Nervous. Very, very dreadfully nervous I had been and am.
1 second. Proceed to scanning.
Scanning. 50%. Madness detected.
A lantern? To prevent echolocation? Like a bat?
Huh? Yes, but why will you say that I am mad?
Sorry, I can't hear you, but good luck.
The obligatory dark lantern dulled my senses, not destroyed, nor sharpened them.
Of course. Right this way.
Wait. How then am I mad? Hearken, and observe how healthily, how calmly I can tell you the whole story. It is impossible to say how first the idea entered my brain. But once conceived, the simulation haunted me with it day and night. Object there was none. Passion there was none. I loved my old man. He had never wronged me. He had never given me insult. For his gold I had no desire. I think it was his eyes. Yes, it was this. He had the eyes of a vulture, cybernetic, pale eyes with a film over them. Brr. Whenever they fell upon me, my blood ran cold. And so, by degrees, very gradually, the simulation made up my mind to take the life of the old man, and thus rid myself of the eyes forever. Now this is the point. You believe me mad. Madmen know nothing. But you should have seen the simulation. You should have seen how wisely it proceeded, with what caution, with what foresight, with what dissimulation it went to work. The simulation was never kinder to the old man than during the whole week before I killed him. And every night, about midnight, I turned the latch of his door and opened it, oh, so gently. And then, when I had made an opening sufficient for my head, I put in my dark lantern, all closed, so that no light shone out, and then I thrust in my head. Oh, you would have laughed to see how cunningly I thrust it in. I moved it slowly, very, very slowly, so that I might not disturb the old man's sleep. It took me an hour to place my whole head within the opening, so far that I could see him as he lay upon his bed. Would a madman have been so wise as this? And then, when my head was well in the room, I undid the lantern cautiously. Oh, so cautiously. I undid it just so much that a single thin ray fell upon the vulture eyes. And this the simulation did for 7 long nights, every night just at midnight. But I found the eyes always closed, and so it was impossible to do the work. For it was not my old man who vexed me, but his evil eyes. And every morning, when the day broke, it bade me boldly into his chamber, and spoke courageously to him. Edgar, 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 how did you sleep? So you see, he would have been a very profound old man indeed, to suspect that every night, just at 12, I looked in upon him while he slept. Upon the 8th night, I was more than usually cautious in opening the door. A watch's minute hand moves more quickly than did mine. Never before that night had I felt the extent of my own powers, of my sagacity. I could hardly contain my feelings of triumph. To think that there I was, opening the door, little by little, and he not even to dream of my secret abilities or thoughts. I fairly chuckled at the idea. And perhaps he heard me, for he moved on the bed suddenly, as if startled. Now you may think that I drew back, but no. His view was as black as pitch with the thick darkness, and so I knew that he could not see the opening of the door, and I kept pushing it on, steadily. I had my head in, and was about to open the lantern, when my thumb slipped upon the tin fastening, and the old man sprang up in bed, crying out,
Who's there?
I kept quite still and said nothing. For a whole hour it did not allow me to move a muscle, and in the meantime I did not hear him lie down. He was still sitting up in the bed listening, just as I have done night after night, hearkening to the death watches in the wall. Presently, I heard a slight groan.
Ugh!
I knew it was the groan of mortal terror. It was not a groan of pain or of grief. Oh no. It was the low, stifled sound that arises from the bottom of the soul when overcharged with awe. I knew the sound well, many a night, just at midnight, when all the world slept. It has welled up from my own core, deepening with its dreadful echo the terrors that distracted me. I say I knew it well. I knew what my old man felt and pitied him, although I chuckled at heart. I knew that he had been lying awake ever since the first slight noise when he had turned in the bed. His fears had been ever since growing upon him. He had been trying to imagine them as causeless, but could not. He had been saying to himself,
"It is nothing but the air in the ventilation. It is only a mouse crossing the floor. It is merely a cricket which has made a single chirp."
Yes, he had been trying to comfort himself with these suppositions, but he had found all in vain. All in vain, because death, in approaching him, had stalked with her black shadow before him and enveloped the victim. And it was the mournful influence of the unperceived shadow that caused him to feel, although he neither saw nor heard, to feel the presence within the room. When I had waited a long time, very patiently, I resolved to open a very, very little crevice in the lantern. So I opened it. You cannot imagine how stealthily, until, at length, a single dim ray, like the thread of the spider, shot from out the crevice and fell upon the vulture eyes. It was open, wide open, and I grew furious as I gazed upon it. I saw it with perfect distinctness, all a dull blue, with a hideous veil over it that chilled the very marrow in my bones. But I could see nothing else of the old man's face or person, for I had directed the ray, as if by instinct, precisely upon the damned spot. And now, have I not told you that what you mistake for madness is but over-acuteness of the senses? Now, I say, there came to my ears a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I knew that sound well, too. It was the beating of my old man's heart. It increased my fury, as the beating of a drum stimulates the soldier into courage. But even yet I refrained and kept still. I hardly breathed. I held the lantern motionless. I tried how steadily I could maintain the ray upon the eye. Meantime, the hellish tattoo of the heart increased. It grew quicker and quicker, and louder every instant. The old man's terror must have been extreme. It grew louder, I say, louder every moment. Do you mark me well? I have told you that I am nervous. So I am. And now, at the dead hour of the night, amid the dreadful silence of that old house, so strange a noise as this excited me to uncontrollable terror. Yet for some minutes longer I refrained and stood still. But the beating grew louder. I thought the heart must burst. And now a new anxiety seized me. The sound would be heard by a neighbor. The old man's hour had come. With a loud yell, I threw down the lantern and leaped onto him. He shrieked once. Die! Once only. In an instant, I dragged him to the floor and pulled the heavy bed over him. I then smiled gaily to find the deed so far done. But for many minutes, the heart beat on with a muffled sound. This, however, did not vex me. It would not be heard through the wall. At length it ceased. My old man was dead. I removed the bed and examined the corpse. Yes, he was stone dead. I placed my hand upon the heart and held it there many minutes. There was no pulsation. He was stone dead. His eyes would trouble me no more. If still you think me mad, you will think so no longer when I describe the wise precautions the simulation gave me for the concealment of the body. The night waned, and I worked hastily, but in silence. First of all, I dismembered the corpse. I cut off the head and the arms and the legs. I then took up 3 planks from the flooring of the chamber and deposited all between the scantlings. I then replaced the boards so cleverly, so cunningly, that no humanoid eye, not even his, could have detected anything wrong. There was nothing to wash out. No stain of any kind, no blood spot whatever. I had been too wary for that. My tub had caught all. When I had made an end of these labors, it was 4 o'clock, still dark as midnight. As the bell sounded the hour, there came a knocking at the street door. I went down to open it with a light heart, for what had I now to fear? There entered 3 men, who introduced themselves with perfect suavity as agents of the government.
Hello, ma'am.
An error had been recorded by a censor during the night. Suspicion of foul play had been aroused. Information had been logged at the data center, and they, the government agents, had been deputed to search the premises. The simulation made me smile, but what had I to fear? I bade the gentleman welcome. The sensor, I said, was malfunctioning, obviously.
Where is Edgar?
My old man, I mentioned, was absent in the country. The simulation took my visitors all over the house. It bade them search well. It led them, at length, to his chamber. I showed them his treasures, secure, undisturbed. In the enthusiasm of my confidence, the simulation brought chairs into the room and desired them here to rest from their fatigues, while it made myself, in the wild audacity of its perfect triumph, placed my own seat upon the very spot beneath which reposed the corpse of the victim. The agents were satisfied.
You said you were nervous?
But my manner had convinced them. I was singularly at ease. They sat, and while I answered cheerily, they chatted of familiar things.
And how do you feel now?
But before long, I felt myself getting pale and wished the simulation over. My head ached, and I imagined a ringing in my ears. But still they sat, and still chatted. The ringing became more distinct. It continued and became more distinct. I talked more freely to get rid of the feeling, but it continued and gained definitiveness, until at length I found that the noise was not within my ears. No doubt I now grew very pale, but I talked more fluently and with a heightened voice. Yet the sound increased, and what could I do? It was a low, dull, quick sound, much such a sound as a watch makes when enveloped in cotton. I gasped for breath, and yet the agents heard it not. I talked more quickly, more vehemently, but the noise steadily increased. I arose and made arguments about technology, in a high key and with violent gesticulations. But the noise steadily increased. Why would the simulation not end? I paced the floor to and fro with heavy strides, as if excited to fury by the observations of the men. But the noise steadily increased. Oh God, what could I do? I foamed, I raved, I swore. I swung the chair upon which I had been sitting and grated it upon the boards. But the noise arose over all and continually increased. It grew louder, 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 and still the men chatted pleasantly and smiled. Was it possible they heard not? Almighty God, no, no, they heard, they suspected, they knew. They were making a mockery of my horror. This I thought, and this I think, but anything was better than this agony. Anything was more tolerable than this derision. I could bear those hypocritical smiles no longer. I felt that I must scream or die. And now again, hark! Louder! 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 Villains! Dissemble no more! I admit the deed. Tear up the planks. Here! Here! It is the beating of his hideous heart. The simulation, which was above all, gave me the acuity of senses. I heard all things in the heaven and in the earth. I heard many things in hell. But why will you say that I am mad?